Andrea pulled aside the plum velvet curtain and peeked through the rain-streaked window of the Gothic Tudor mansion. In the moonlight, she could see the Ferrari still parked in the circular drive 2 stories below. It was her only chance of escape. She let go of the heavy fabric and stepped away from the window. As she crept toward the door, she glanced at her roommate already asleep in the large 4-poster bed. Andrea pulled slowly on the solid wood door, but there was no stopping the loud creak that came from the ancient English oak. "Where are you going?" Andrea turned to see Violet sitting up in bed. Her heart raced. "Oh, just to the bathroom. I'll be right back." Andrea watched her roommate lie back against her pillow before she stepped into the hall. The hall was dimly lit from the lights that remained on downstairs. All the girls had retired to their rooms. The only ones still awake were their leader and his dinner guest, the CEO of a tech giant that started in Seattle. Andrea smoothed the base of her short silk nightgown when she reached the top of the wooden staircase. She looked down at her bare legs as she tiptoed down the stairs. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she could hear laughter in the library. She glanced at the solid oak doors at the castle's main entrance, knowing she couldn't use them for her escape. The security camera on the outside would give her away immediately. She knew there was also a guard roaming the perimeter, but she'd have to avoid being seen. She stepped off the stairs onto the herringbone floor. She moved past 2 medieval knights propped next to the staircase, exported from Wales by the castle's original owner, when she heard the voice of their dinner guest. "Thank you so much for having me. I better get back to the city," said the tech CEO. The door to the library opened, flooding the mansion's grand entrance with light. Andrea ran toward the rear of the home on the balls of her feet.
"There's just one more thing I'd like to show you before you go."
There was no mistaking the deep voice of their leader before she slipped inside the slightly ajar door to the butler's pantry. Andrea ran through the narrow space toward the door that opened to the rear of the property. She glanced behind her shoulder before turning the knob. She looked in both directions before stepping onto the damp concrete patio. There was no guard in sight. The rear of the estate's exterior was softly lit by an occasional Gothic lamppost. She ran to the right, stopping in her tracks when she saw the outline of the guard step out from beside the massive structure. She looked down at her white silk gown, realizing she stuck out like a ghost in the night. She should have changed into dark clothes, but what would she have said if she got caught before she left the castle? The guard stopped as a familiar male voice came over her radio.
"Camilla, could you please let Rochelle out the front gate in a few minutes? She's just leaving."
"Sure thing." Andrea heard Camilla reply before she disappeared around the side of the house. Andrea turned and sprinted barefoot across the cold patio. She could only hope she'd make it to the Ferrari before being seen. Heart pumping, she rounded the dark corner. She pushed herself to run faster along the wet grass until she reached the front of the grand home. She was out of breath when she reached the circular driveway. The Ferrari was still parked in the drive, in front of the sculpted fountain. Andrea stood alone on the grounds of the large gated compound for a brief moment before Camilla stepped out from the side of the castle. Camilla hummed to herself as she made her way across the lawn with her rifle slung over her shoulder. Andrea crouched behind the sports car and waited until Camilla's footsteps sounded on the paved drive. Andrea lifted her head above the roof of the Ferrari and watched Camilla stroll in the opposite direction. She reached for the trunk, but her hand stilled an inch from the latch above the emblem of a silver prancing horse. Their leader had made a comment when the tech CEO had arrived that there was no need to lock her car inside his gated estate. Hearing this had spurred Andrea's escape plan in her mind. But now she worried if he had only made the comment as a joke, or as an excuse to brag about his private estate's security. Andrea would surely be caught and punished if her attempt to open the trunk set off the sports car's alarm. But she had no choice. She couldn't stay here any longer. She pressed her fingers beneath the trunk latch and pulled. The rear window lifted without a noise. She took a last glance toward the castle before she climbed inside the trunk.